Lucky, happy, wappy, jobu jobi de. Dibutu, patu patu puti, tabutu bi. Lucky, happy, choppy, wappy, hockey, tappy, stappy, lappy, puppy, doopy doopy doo. Wait, where's my bookshelf? I think I will go to bookshelf and read this stupid shit. So much buttons I have to click, like one here, one, two there.
Socialization and 4, the left course. Module 11, the role of socialization. Module 12, the self and socialization. Module 13, agents of socialization. Module 14, socialization throughout the left course. Sociology at work, correctional counselor. Looking ahead. In this chapter, we will examine the role of socialization in human development. We will begin by analyzing the interaction of heredity with environmental factors. Then we will explore how people develop perceptions, feelings, and beliefs about themselves. We will pay particular attention to important agents of socialization, including the family, schools, peers, the... Joan Harris works with women inmates at a small prison facility outside Los Angeles. As a correctional counselor, Harris helps inmates create relapse prevention plans that usually include further education and learning new job skills. But the most important thing, she believes, is the opportunities she provides for the women to practice normal social relationships. I started to chill out club, Harris says. We get together twice a week, leave our issues behind, and just enjoy sharing pizza and watching a movie or dancing to music. Harris understands how critical the role of socialization is to the development of self. So many of these women have suffered physical and emotional abuse. The mirrors their world has held up to them reflect something ugly and worthless, she says. I help them to find a better, truer mirror. One that shows their strengths. A lot of women have a wonderful, arch humor and keen nose for what is practical. Those are great traits to have in the real world. Media and technology, the workplace, and religion. As we will see, socialization is a process that spans the entire left course. In the social policy section that closes the chapter, we will focus on the socialization experience of group child care for young children. Module 11, the role of socialization learning objectives. Low 11 will explain the role of socialization in shaping human behavior and attitudes. 88. Sociologists are interested in the lifelong process of socialization, through which people learn the attitudes, values, and behaviors appropriate for members of their culture. Socialization occurs through human interactions that begin in infancy and continue through retirement. We learn a great deal from those people most important in our lives: immediate family members, best friends, and teachers. But we also learn from people we see on the street, on television, on the internet, and in films and magazines. From a micro-sociological perspective, socialization helps us to discover how to behave properly and what to expect from others if we follow, or challenge, society's norms and values. From a macro-sociological perspective, socialization provides for the transmission of culture from one generation to the next, to ensure the long-term continuity of a society. Socialization also shapes our self-images. For example, in the United States, a person is viewed as too heavy or too short because he or she does not conform to the ideal cultural standard of physical attractiveness. Such an unfavorable evaluation is an aspect of socialization that can significantly influence self-esteem and shape one's personality. In everyday speech, the term personality refers to a person's typical patterns of attitudes, needs, characteristics, and behavior. How much of the personality is shaped by culture, as opposed to inborn traits? In what ways does socialization continue into adulthood? Who are the most powerful agents of socialization? These are some of the issues that we will consider in this chapter. Low 11 to 1 socialization. What makes us who we are? Is it the genes we are born with, or the environment in which we grow up? Researchers have traditionally clashed over the relative importance of biological inheritance and environmental factors in human development, conflict called the nature versus nurture, or heredity versus environment, debate. Today, most social scientists have moved beyond this debate, acknowledging instead the interaction of these variables in shaping human development. However, we can better appreciate how heredity and environmental factors interact and influence the socialization process if we first examine situations in which one factor operates almost entirely without the other. Holmes, 1979. Low 11 to 2 social environment. The impact of isolation. In the 1994 movie Nell, Jodie Foster played a young woman hidden from birth by her mother in a backwoods cabin. Raised without normal human contact, Nell brushes speaks or sings in a language all her own. This movie was drawn from the actual account of an emaciated 16-year-old boy who appeared mysteriously in 1828 in the town square of Nuremberg, Germany, Lutz in 1994. Viewers may have found the story of Nell difficult to believe, but social scientists have encountered similar cases. The two cases that follow describe the documented effects of extreme social isolation and neglect. Extreme isolation, Isabel. The dramatic story of a child called Isabel was all too real. For the first 6 years of her life, Isabel lived in almost total seclusion in a darkened room. She had little contact with other people, with the exception of her mother, who could neither speak nor hear. Isabel's mother's parents had been so deeply ashamed of Isabel's illegitimate birth that they kept her hidden away from the world. Ohio authorities finally discovered the child in 1938, when Isabel's mother escaped from her parents' home, taking her daughter with her. Module 11. The role of socialization, 89. In Romania, special programs emphasizing social interaction have helped orphans to overcome years of social isolation. This situation came to light as families in North America and Europe began to adopt thousands of the orphans. For about 20% of those adopted, adjustment problems were so dramatic that the adopting families suffered guilty fears of being ill-fit parents. Many of them asked for assistance in dealing with the children. Slowly, efforts were made to introduce the deprived youngsters.
What the fuck? You just skipped this part. Only communication was simple gestures. Since she had been seeing few people. Strong fear of strangers, like a wild animal. Accustomed to seeing certain individuals. Extreme apathy. At first observed she was deaf, but she soon began to react to nearby sounds. She scored a level of infant than a 6-year-old. Suspended her training program to adapt. After a few days of training, she made her first attempt to verbalize, though she started slowly, passed through 6 years of development. In a little over 2 months, she was speaking complete sentences. 9 months later, she could identify word sentences. Before 9, she was ready to attend school with other children. By age 14, she was in 6th grade. Without an opportunity to experience socialization, Isabel had been hardly human in the social sense. Her inability to communicate, despite her, underscored the impact of socialization. Children need socialization for love, care, affection. Humans cannot learn to speak with or interact with others expected. They need positive interaction. Other children be locked away, severely neglected. Only a few cases of total isolation. Extremely neglectful infants, orphanage, Eastern Europe. Grew up fearful. Damn, Romanian children. 20%.
As with Isabel, the Romanian orphans underscored the significance of the social environment in a child's development. Increasingly, researchers are emphasizing the importance of the earliest socialization experiences for all children, including those who grow up in more normal environments. We know now that it is not enough to care for an infant's physical needs. Parents must also concern themselves with their children's social development. If, for example, children are discouraged from having friends even as toddlers, they will miss out on experiences with peers that are critical to their socialization and emotional growth. Primate studies. Studies of animals raised in isolation also support the importance of socialization in development. Harry Harlow, 1971, a researcher at the Primate Laboratory of the University of Wisconsin, conducted tests with rhesus monkeys that had been raised away from their mothers and away from contact with other monkeys. As was the case with Isabel, the rhesus monkeys raised in isolation were fearful and easily frightened. They did not mate, and the females who were artificially inseminated became abusive mothers. Apparently, isolation had a damaging effect on the monkeys. A creative aspect of Harlow's experimentation was his use of artificial mothers. In one such experiment, Harlow presented monkeys raised in isolation with two substitute mothers, one cloth-covered replica and one covered with wire that had the ability to offer milk. Monkey after monkey went to the wire mother who liked giving milk, yet spent much more time clinging to the more mother-led cloth model. It appears that the infant monkeys developed greater social attachments from their need for warmth, comfort, and intimacy than from their need for milk. While these studies may seem to suggest that heredity can be dismissed as a factor in the social development of humans and animals, studies of twins reveal a fascinating interplay between heredity and environment. Low 11 degree the influence of heredity. Identical twins Oscar Store and Jacob were separated soon after their birth and raised on different continents, in very different cultural settings. Oscar was reared as a strict Catholic by his maternal grandmother in the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia. As Emmy Emperor of the Hitler Youth movement in Nazi Germany, he learned to hate Jews. In contrast, his brother Jack was reared in Trinidad by the twins' Jewish father. Jack joined Israel. Module 11. The role of socialization 91. Kibbutz, a collective settlement, at age 17 and later served in the Israeli army. When the twins were reunited in middle age, however, some startling similarities emerged. They both wore wire-rimmed glasses and mustaches. They both liked spicy foods and sweet liqueurs, were absent-minded, flushed the toilet before using it, stored rubber bands on their wrists, and picked butter toast in their coffee. Old 1980. The twins also differed in many important respects. Jack was a workaholic. Oscar enjoyed leisure time activities. Oscar was a traditionalist who was domineering toward women. Jack was a political liberal who was much more accepting of feminism. Finally, Jack was extremely proud of being Jewish, whereas Oscar never mentioned his Jewish heritage. Old 1987. Oscar and Jack are prime examples of the interplay of heredity and environment. For a number of years, the Minnesota Twin Family Study has been following 137 sets of identical twins reared apart to determine what similarities, if any, they show in personality traits, behavior, and intelligence. Preliminary results from the available twin studies indicate that both genetic factors and socialization experiences are influential in human development. Certain characteristics, such as temperaments, voice patterns, and nervous habits, appear to be strikingly similar even in twins reared apart, suggesting that these qualities may be linked to hereditary causes. However, identical twins reared apart differ far more in their attitudes, values, chosen mates, and even drinking habits. These qualities, it would seem, are influenced by environmental factors. In examining clusters of personality traits among such twins, researchers have found marked similarities in their tendency toward leadership or dominance, but significant differences in their need for intimacy, comfort, and assistance. Researchers have also been impressed with the similar scores on intelligence tests of twins reared apart in roughly similar social settings. Most of the identical twins register scores even closer than those that would be expected if the same person took a test class. At the same time, however, identical twins brought up in dramatically different social environments score quite differently on intelligence tests, a finding that supports the impact of socialization on human development. See 2012. We need to be cautious in reviewing studies of twin pairs and other relevant research. Widely broadcast findings have often been based on preliminary analysis of extremely small samples. For example, one study, not involving twin pairs, was frequently cited as confirming genetic links with behavior. Yet the researchers had to retract their conclusions after they increased the sample and reclassified two of the original cases. After those changes, the initial findings were no longer valid. Critics add that studies of twin pairs have not provided satisfactory information concerning the extent to which separated identical twins may have had contact with each other, even though they were raised apart. Such interactions, especially if they were extensive, could call into question the validity of the twin studies. As this debate continues, we can certainly anticipate numerous efforts to replicate the research and clarify the interplay between heredity and environmental factors in human development. Fork in 1993, Globe in 1989.
Hereditary and environment.
Study alert. The phrase looking glass self emphasizes the idea that our sense of self is a result of our social interactions. Remember, though,
Yeah. Where's Mimi? What's your problem? You always yell at me. Always yell at me. Do your mom.
though, that the self is based on how an individual imagines others view him or her, and our view of ourselves may be skewed by faulty perceptions of how others see us. We were not born with these understandings. Building on the work of George Herbert Mead, 1964b, sociologists recognize that our concept of who we are, the self, emerges as we interact with others. The self is a distinct identity that sets us apart from others. It is not a static phenomenon, but continues to develop and change throughout our lives. Low 12 to 1 sociological approaches to the self. Sociologists and psychologists alike have expressed interest in how the individual develops and modifies a sense of self as a result of social interaction. The work of sociologists Charles Gordon Cooley and George Herbert Mead, pioneers of the interactionist approach, has been especially useful in furthering our understanding of these important issues. Cooley, looking glass self. In the early 1900s, Charles Gordon Cooley advanced the belief that we learn who we are by interacting with others. Our view of ourselves, then, comes not only from direct contemplation of our personal qualities but also from our impressions of how others perceive us. Cooley used the phrase looking glass self to emphasize that the self is the product of our social interactions. The process of developing a self-identity or self-concept has three phases. First, we imagine how we present ourselves to others, to relatives, friends, even strangers on the street. Then we imagine how others evaluate us, attractive, intelligent, shy, or strange. Finally, we develop some sort of feeling about ourselves, such as respect or shame, as a result of these impressions. Cooley 1902, Michael C. Howard 1989. A subtle but critical aspect of Cooley's looking glass self is that the self results from an individual's imagination of how others view him or her. As a result, we can develop self-identities based on incorrect perceptions of how others see us. A student may react strongly to a teacher's criticism and decide, wrongly, that the instructor views the student as stupid. This misperception may be converted into a negative self-identity through the following process. 1. The teacher criticized me. 2. The teacher must think that I'm stupid. 3. I am stupid. Yet self-identities are also subject to change. If a student receives an A at the end of the course, he or she will probably no longer feel stupid. Mead, Stages of the Self. George Herbert Mead continued Kuhn's exploration of interactionist theory. Mead, 1934-1964, developed a useful model of a three-stage process by which the self emerges: the preparatory stage, the play stage, and the game stage. The preparatory stage. During the preparatory stage, children merely imitate the people around them, especially family members with whom they continually interact. Thus, a small child will bang on a piece of wood while a parent is engaged in carpentry work, or will try to grow a ball if an older sibling is doing so nearby. As they grow older, children become more adept at using symbols, including the gestures and words that form the basis of human communication. By interacting with relatives and friends, as well as by watching cartoons on television and looking at feature books, children in the preparatory stage begin to understand symbols. They will continue to use this form of communication throughout their lives. The play stage. Mead was among the first to analyze the relationship of symbols to socialization. As children develop skill in communicating through symbols, they gradually become more aware of social relationships. As a result, during the play stage, they begin to pretend to be other people. Just as an actor becomes a character, a child becomes a doctor, parent, superhero, and ship captain. 94 Chapter 4 Socialization and the Life Course. Mead, in fact, noted that an important aspect of the play stage is role-playing. Role-taking is the process of mentally assuming the perspective of another and responding from that imagined viewpoint. For example, through this process a young child will gradually learn when it is best to ask a parent for favors. If the parent usually comes home from work in a bad mood, the child will wait until after dinner, when the parent is more relaxed and approachable. The game stage. In Mead's third stage, the game stage, the child of about age 8 or 9 no longer just plays roles but begins to consider several tasks and relationships simultaneously. At this point in development, children grasp not only their own social positions but also those of others around them. Just as in a basketball game, the players must understand their own and everyone else's positions. Consider a girl or boy who is part of a scout troop out on a weekend hike in the mountains. The child must understand what he or she is expected to do but must also recognize the responsibilities of other scouts as well as the leaders. This is the final stage of development under Mead's model. The child can now respond to numerous members of the social environment. Mead uses the term generalized other to refer to the attitudes, viewpoints, and expectations of society as a whole that a child takes into account in his or her behavior. Simply put, this concept suggests that when an individual acts, he or she takes into account an entire group of people. For example, a child will not act courteously merely to please a particular parent. Rather, the child comes to understand that courtesy is a widespread social value endorsed by parents, teachers, and religious leaders. Table 4-1 summarizes the three stages of the self outlined by George Herbert Mead. Mead, Theory of the Self. Mead is best known for his theory of the self. According to Mead, 1964 B, the self begins at a privileged, central position in a person's world. Young children picture themselves as the focus of everything around them and find it difficult to consider the perspectives of others. For example, when shown a mountain scene and asked to describe what an observer on the opposite side of the mountain might see, such as a lake or hikers, young children describe only objects visible from their vantage point. This childhood tendency to place ourselves at the center of events never entirely disappears. Many people with a fear of flying automatically assume that if any plane goes down, it will be the one they are on. And reads the horoscope section in the paper without looking at their own horoscope first. Why else do we buy lottery tickets if we do not imagine ourselves winning? Nonetheless, as people mature, the self changes and begins to reflect greater concern about the reactions of others. Parents, friends, coworkers, coaches, and teachers are often among those who play a major role in shaping a person's self. The term significant others is used to refer to those individuals who are most important in the development of the self. Many young people, for example, find themselves drawn to the same kind of work their parents engage in. H. Sullivan, 1953-1968. Table 4-1B Stages of the self. Summing up. Stage. Self-present. Definition. Example. Preparation. No. Child imitates the actions of others. When adults laugh and smile, child laughs and smiles. Play. Developing. Child takes the role of a single other, as if he or she were the other. Child first takes the role of doctor, then the role of patient. Game. Yes. Child considers the roles of two or more others simultaneously. In game of hide and seek, child takes into account the roles of both hider and seeker. Module 12 The Self and Socialization 95. Goffin, Presentation of the Self. How do we manage ourselves? How do we display to others who we are? Irving Goffin, a sociologist associated with the interactionist perspective, suggested that many of our daily activities involve attempts to convey impressions of who we are. These observations help us to understand the sometimes subtle yet critical ways in which we learn to present ourselves socially. They also offer concrete examples of this aspect of socialization. Early in life, the individual learns to slant his or her presentation of the self in order to create distinctive appearances and satisfy particular audiences. Goffin, 1959, referred to this altering of the presentation of the self as impression management. From the perspective of an employment specialist, how can impression management be useful to your clients who are seeking work after a long period of unemployment? What would you advise them to do and say at a job interview to avoid being tagged as a loser? In analyzing such everyday social interactions, Goffman makes so many explicit parallels to the theater that his view has been termed the dramaturgical approach. According to this perspective, people resemble performers in action. For example, a clerk may try to appear busier than he or she actually is if a supervisor happens to be watching. A customer in a singles bar may try to look as if he or she is waiting for a particular person to arrive. Goffman, 1959, also drew attention to another aspect of the self, face work. How often do you initiate some kind of face-saving behavior when you feel embarrassed or rejected? In response to a rejection at the singles bar, a person may engage in face work by saying, "There really isn't an interesting person in this entire crowd." We feel the need to maintain a proper image of the self if we are to continue social interaction. Face work is a necessity for those who are unemployed. In an economic downturn like the recent recession, unemployment affects people of all social classes, many of whom are unaccustomed to being jobless. A recent ethnographic study found that newly unemployed redefining what it means to be out of work. They were focusing more than in the past on what they were accomplishing, and have begun to value volunteer work more since they have become volunteers themselves. Participants in this study engaged in both impression management and people judge us by our appearance, attire, body language, demeanor, and mannerisms. Knowing that they do, most of us altered the way we present ourselves to others, a strategy that Goffman called impression management. Phase work, Garrett Peters, 2009. Goffman's work on the self represents a logical progression of sociological studies begun by Cooley and Mead on how personal ideas acquired through socialization and how we manage the presentation of the self to others. Cooley stressed the process by which we create a self. Mead focused on how the self develops as we learn to interact with others. Goffman emphasized the ways in which we consciously create images of ourselves for others. Low 12 psychological approaches to the self. Psychologists have shared the interest of Cooley, Mead, and other sociologists in the development of the self. Early work in psychology, such as that of Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, stressed the role of inborn drives among the drive for sexual gratification in channeling human behavior. More recently, psychologists such as Jean Piaget have emphasized the stages through which human development progresses. 96 Chapter 4 Socialization and the Life Force. Like Charles Horton Cooley and George Herbert Mead, Freud believed that the self is a social product, and that aspects of one's personality are influenced by other people, especially one's parents. However, unlike Cooley and Mead, he suggested that the self has components that work in opposition to each other. According to Freud, our natural impulsive instincts are in constant conflict with societal constraints. Part of us seeks limitless pleasure, while another part favors rational behavior. By interacting with others, we learn the expectations of society and then select behavior most appropriate to our culture. Of course, as Freud was well aware, we sometimes distort reality and behave irrational. Research on newborn babies by the Swiss child psychologist Jean Piaget, 1896 to 1980, has underscored the importance of social interactions in developing a sense of self. Piaget found that newborns have no self in the sense of last stage. Ironically, they are much upset, demand all things to be right. Newborns have not yet separated themselves from the universe which they are a part. For these babies, the phrase humanity has no meaning. They understand only you. However, as they mature, children are gradually socialized into social relationships, even within their rather self-centered world. In his well-known cognitive theory of development, Piaget, 1954, identified 4 stages in the development of children's thought processes. In the first, or sensorial stage, young children use their senses to make discoveries. For example, through touching they discover that their hands are actually a part of themselves. During the second, or pre-operational stage, children begin to use words and symbols to distinguish objects and ideas. The milestone in the third, or concrete operational stage is that children engage in more logical thinking. They learn that even when a formless lump of clay is shaped into a snake, it is still the same clay. In the fourth, or formal operational stage, adolescents become capable of sophisticated abstract thought and can deal logically with ideas and values. According to Piaget, social interaction is the key to development. As children grow older, they pay increasing attention to how other people think and why they act in particular ways. In order to develop a distinct personality, each of us needs opportunities to interact with others. As we saw earlier, Isabel was deprived of the chance for normal social interactions, and the consequences were severe. Kitchener, 1991. We have seen that a number of thinkers considered social interaction the key to the development of an individual's sense of self. As is generally true, we can best understand this topic by drawing on a variety of theory and research. Table 422 summarizes the rich literature, both sociological and psychological, on the development of the self. Table 422 theoretical approaches to development of the self tracking sociological perspectives. Scholar. Key concepts and contributions. Major points of theory. Charles Horton Cooley, 1864 to 1929, sociologist, USA. Looking glass self. Stages of development not distinct, feelings toward ourselves developed through interaction with others. George Herbert Mead, 1863 to 1931, sociologist, USA. The self-generalized other. 3 distinct stages of development. Self develops as children grasp the roles of others in their lives. Irving Goffman, 1922 to 1982, sociologist, USA. Impression management, dramaturgical approach-based work. Self-developed through the impressions we convey to others and to groups. Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, psychotherapist, Austria. Psychoanalysis. Self-influenced by parents and by inborn drives, such as the drive for sexual gratification. Jean Piaget, 1896 to 1980, child psychologist, Switzerland. Cognitive theory of development. 4 stages of cognitive development. Module 12, the self and socialization, 97. Read each question carefully and then select or provide the best answer. One which of the following social scientists used the phrase looking glass self to emphasize that the self is a product of our social interactions with other people? A. George Herbert Mead. B. Charles Horton Cooley. C. Irving Goffman. D. Jean Piaget. 2. In what he called the play stage of socialization, George Herbert Mead asserted.
I don't fucking care.
Learning objectives. Low 13 to 1 explain how the family, the school, and peer groups affect socialization from the early years into young adulthood. Low 13 to 2 analyze the ways in which technology and the institutions of work, religion, and the state contribute to the socialization process during the life course. Module outline. Family, school, peer group, mass media, and technology workplace. Religion and the state. As we have seen, the culture of the United States is defined by rather gradual movements from one stage of socialization to the next. The continuing and lifelong socialization process involves many different social forces that influence our lives and alter our self-images. The family is the most important agent of socialization in the United States, especially for children. In this chapter, we'll also discuss 6 other agents of socialization: the school, the peer group, the mass media and technology, the workplace, religion, and the state. Low 13 to 1 family. The lifelong process of learning begins shortly after birth. Since newborns can hear, see, smell, taste, and feel heat, cold, and pain, they are constantly orienting themselves to the surrounding world. Human beings, especially family members, constitute an important part of their social environment. People minister to a baby's needs by feeding, cleaning, carrying, and comforting the baby. In the United States, social development also includes exposure to cultural assumptions regarding gender and race. Black parents, for example, have learned that children as young as age 2 can absorb negative messages about blacks in children's books, toys, and television shows, all of which are designed primarily for white consumers. At the same time, black children are exposed more often than others to the inner city youth gang culture. Because most blacks, even those who are middle class, live near very poor neighborhoods, their children are susceptible to these influences, despite their parents' strong family values. Lynn and Busan 1999, until 1999. The term gender role refers to expectations regarding the proper behavior, attitudes, and activities of males and females. For example, we traditionally think of toughness as masculine and desirable only in men, while we view tenderness as feminine. Other cultures do not necessarily assign these qualities to each gender in the way that our culture does. The existence of gender roles does not imply that inevitably males and females rule. Module 13. Agents of Socialization 99. Study alert. Conflict theorists and functionalists both believe that schools act as agents of socialization by teaching students the values and customs of the larger society, but conflict theorists also believe schools foster competition through a system of rewards and punishments, and sharpen the divisions in society. Assume certain roles, nor does it imply that those roles are quite distinct from one another. Rather, gender roles emphasize the fact that males and females are not genetically predetermined to occupy certain roles. From the perspective of a preschool teacher, knowing that children as young as age 2 absorb negative messages about race and gender in books, TV shows, and toys, what resources and activities would you select to use in your classroom? What are some books, toys, and activities you would choose to avoid? As the primary agents of childhood socialization, parents play a critical role in guiding children into those gender roles being appropriate in a society. Other adults, older siblings, the mass media, and religious and educational institutions also have a noticeable impact on child socialization into feminine and masculine norms. A culture or subculture may require that one sex or the other take primary responsibility for the socialization of children, economic support of the family, or religious or intellectual leadership. In some societies, girls are socialized mainly by their mothers and boys by their fathers, an arrangement that may prevent girls from learning critical survival skills. In South Asia, fathers teach their sons to swim to prepare them for a life as fishermen. Girls typically do not learn to swim. When the deadly tsunami hit the coast of South Asia in 2004, many more men survived than women.
I've been at 3:45 for a minute now, to be honest. So I've checked. I have no idea if I got a channel. You can check. Check. If I got a channel. You can check. I don't know, was that happening now? Wait, no idea. I'm a little tired now. Okay. Alright, what should we do? 295?
Low 13 to 1 school. Like a family, schools have an explicit mandate to socialize people in the United States, especially children, into the norms and values of our culture. As conflict theorist Samuel Bowles and Herbert Jenkins, 1976, have observed, schools in this country foster competition through built-in systems of reward and punishment, such as grades and evaluations by teachers. Consequently, a child who is experiencing difficulty trying to learn a new skill can sometimes come to feel stupid and unsuccessful. However, as the self matures, children become capable of increasingly realistic assessments of their intellectual, physical, and social abilities. Functionalists point out that schools, as agents of socialization, fulfill the function of teaching children the values and customs of the larger society. Conflict theorists agree, but add that schools can reinforce the divisive aspects of society, especially those of social class. For example, higher education in the United States is costly despite the existence of financial aid programs. Students from affluent backgrounds therefore have an advantage in gaining access to universities and professional training. At the same time, less affluent young people may never receive the preparation that would qualify them for the best. A daughter learns how to weave fabric from her mother in Guatemala. The family is the most important agent of socialization, paying and most prestigious jobs. 100 Chapter 4 Socialization and the Life Course. Research today. 41 Rome Springer, raising children on style. All families face challenges raising their children, but what if your parents expected you not to dance, listen to music, watch television, or access the internet? This is the challenge faced by Amish teens and their parents, who embrace a lifestyle of the mid-1800s. Amish youth boys in particular often rebel against their parents' strict morals by getting drunk, behaving disrespectfully, and indulging in worldly activities, such as buying a car. At times even the girls may become involved, to their family's dismay. As one scholar puts it, the rowdiness of Amish youth is an embarrassment to church leaders and a stigma in the larger community. Cradle 2001:138. Yet the strong pull of mainstream American culture has led Amish parents to routineize, almost to accept, some of their. All families face challenges raising their children, but what if your parents expected you not to dance, listen to music, watch television, or access the internet? Children's worldly activities. They expect to do lessons to test their subcultures done by IDS during a period of discovery called Rumspringa, a German term meaning running around. A common occurrence during which young people attend barn dances and break social norms for drinking, smoking, and driving cars. Rumspringa is definitely not supported by the Amish religion. Parents often react to these escapades by looking the other way, sometimes leader ally. If they hear radio music coming from the barn, or a motorcycle driving onto their property in the middle of the night, they don't retaliate by punishing their offspring. Instead, they pretend not to notice, secure in the knowledge that Amish children almost always return to the community's traditional Values. Indeed, despite the flirtation with popular culture and modern technology that is common during the Rom Spring, the vast majority of Amish youths who return to the Amish community and become baptized. Scholars report that 85 to 90% of Amish children accept the faith as young adults. To mainstream Americans, this Latino known and understood subculture became a source of entertainment when in 2004, UPN aired a 10-week reality program called Amish in the City. In the series, 5 Amish youths allegedly on Rom Spring moved in with 6 worldly wise young adults in Los Angeles. On behalf of the Amish community, some critics called the series exploitative, a sign of how vulnerable the Amish are. No similar series would be developed on the rebellion of Muslim or Orthodox Jewish youths, they charged. Let's discuss. 1. Do you or anyone you know come from a subculture that rejects mainstream American culture? If so, describe the community's norms and values. How do they resemble and how do they differ from Amish norms and values? 2. Why do you think so many Amish youths return to their family's way of life after rebelling against it? Sources: Cradle 2001, R. Shaper and Zellner 2011, Shashman 2006, Step 2007, One Route 2004. Low 13 to 1 peer group. As a child grows older, the family becomes somewhat less important in social development. Instead, peer groups increasingly assume the role of meet significant others. Within a peer group, young people associate with others who are approximately their age, and who often enjoy a similar social status. Giordano 2003. We can see how important peer groups are to young people when their social lives are strained by war or disaster. In Baghdad, the overthrow of Saddam Hussein has profoundly changed teenagers' worlds, casting doubt on their future. Some young people have lost relatives or friends, others have become involved with fundamentalist groups or fled with their families to safer countries. Those youths who are left behind can suffer intense loneliness and boredom. Confined to their homes by crime and terrorism, those fortunate enough to have computers turn to internet chat rooms or immerse themselves in their studies. Through email, they struggle to maintain old friendships interrupted by wartime dislocation. Sanders 2004. Gender differences are noteworthy among adolescents. Boys and girls are socialized by their parents, peers, and the media to identify many of the same paths to popularity, but... Module 13. Agents of Socialization 101. Table 4-3 High School Popularity. What makes high school girls popular? What makes high school boys popular? According to college men. According to college women. According to college men. According to college women. 1. Physical attractiveness. 2. Grade/intelligence. 3. Participation in sports. 4. General sociability. 5. Popularity with boys. 1. Grade/intelligence. 2. Participation in sports. 3. General sociability. 4. Physical attractiveness. 5. Clothes. 1. Participation in sports. 2. Grade/intelligence. 3. Popularity with girls. 4. General sociability. 5. Car. 1. Participation in sports. 2. Grade/intelligence. 3. General sociability. 4. Physical attractiveness. 5. School club/government. Note: students at the following universities were asked in which ways adolescents in their high schools had gained prestige with their peers: Cornell University, Louisiana State University, Southeastern Louisiana University, State University of New York at Albany, State University of New York at Stony Brook, University of Georgia, and University of New Hampshire. Source: Suter et al. 2001:445. To different degrees. Table 4-3 compares male and female college students' reports of how girls and boys they knew became popular in high school. The two groups named many of the same paths to popularity but gave them different order of importance. While neither men nor women named sexual activity, drug use, or alcohol use as one of the top 5 paths, college men were much more likely than women to mention those behaviors as a means to becoming popular, for both boys and girls. Low 13-2 Mass media and technology. In the past century, media innovations, radio, motion pictures, recorded music, television, and the internet have become important agents of socialization. The question is no longer whether young people are plugged in, but how they use these resources. Today, 95% of those aged 12 to 17 are on the internet. No surprise there, but 91% of them post photos identifying themselves by name. 92% use their real names, and 82% post their birth dates on social media. Increasingly, then, socialization occurs online. The age at which young people go online has also been dropping, prompting concern about the potential for media abuse at an earlier and earlier age. Over the last decade, the American Academy of Pediatrics began by publishing concerns about teen use of the internet. Recently, the organization published guidelines for the 90% of infants who use the internet by their parents. Of course, American Academy of Pediatrics 2011, 2013, Madden et al. 2013. In Sarta, Uganda, a woman makes a quick telephone call. Cell phones play a critical role in communications and commerce in developing countries, where other ways of connecting are less available or more expensive. The media, however, are not always a negative socializing influence. Television programs and even commercials can introduce young people to unfamiliar lifestyles and cultures. Not only do children in the United States learn about life in faraway lands, but inner-city children learn about the lives of farm children, and vice versa. The same thing happens in other countries. Sociologists and other social scientists have begun to consider the impact of technology on socialization. They are particularly interested in the online friendship networks, like Facebook and Twitter. To assess the importance of social media in our daily lives, they typically begin by studying how we use them. In a novel approach, some researchers have asked what would happen if we stopped using social media. Not just in industrial nations, but in Africa and other developing areas, people have been socialized into relying on new communications technologies. Not long ago, if Saudi Iyombe wanted to talk to his mother, he had to make an 8-day trip from the capital city of Kinshasa up the Congo River by boat to the rural town where he was born. Now both he and his mother have access to a cell phone, and they send text messages to each other daily. Iyombe and his mother. 102 Chapter 4 Socialization and the Life Course. Are not atypical. Although cell phones aren't cheap, 1.4 billion owners in developing countries have come to consider them a necessity. Today, there are more cell phones in developing nations than in industrial nations, the first time in history that developing nations have outpaced the developed world in the adoption of telecommunications technology, case Sullivan 2006. That said, not all new communications technologies are widely available in developing nations. For example, many people in these countries cannot afford broadband internet service. In terms of their relative income, broadband service is 40 times more expensive to people in developing countries than it is to the typical person in an industrialized nation. International Telecommunication Union 2012. Low 13-2 workplace. Learning to behave appropriately in an occupation is a fundamental aspect of human socialization. It used to be that going to work began with the end of our formal schooling, but that is no longer the case, at least not in the United States. More and more young people work today, and not just for a parent or relative. Adolescents generally seek Seek jobs in order to make spending money. 80% of high school seniors say that little or none of what they earn goes to family expenses. These teens rarely look on their employment as a means of exploring vocational interests or getting on-the-job training. Some observers feel that the increasing number of teenagers who are working earlier in life and for longer hours are finding the workplace almost as important an agent of socialization as school.
Looking good. Homo. Some of these. I'm just a kid. Data. Glad you found me. Glad that was funny. Are you bi? Or Neil? Are you bi? Question. Are you bi? My folks are chill. Nice to meet you. Nice to know. Nice to know. Great. That's cool. That's sweet. Eyes, gaze. All good. That's sweet. Eyes, gaze. All good.
School. In fact, a number of educators complain that student time at work is adversely affecting schoolwork. The level of teenage employment in the United States is the highest among industrial countries, which may provide one explanation for why U.S. high school students lag behind those in other countries on international achievement tests. Socialization in the workplace changes when it involves a more permanent shift from an after-school job to full-time employment. Occupational socialization can be most intense during the transition from school to job, but it continues throughout one's work history. Technological advances may alter the requirements of a position and necessitate some degree of resocialization. Today, men and women change occupations, employers, or places of work many times during their adult years. For example, the typical worker spends about 4 years with an employer. Occupational socialization continues, then, throughout a person's years in the labor market. The all of 2010. From the perspective of a human resources manager, how would you minimize isolation and increase occupational socialization for employees who largely work from home? College students today recognize that occupational socialization is not socialization into one lifetime occupation. They anticipate going through a number of jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2010, has found that from ages 18 to 42, the typical person has held 11 jobs. This high rate of turnover in employment applies to both men and women, and to those with a college degree as well as those with a high school diploma. Low 13 to religion and the state. Increasingly, social scientists are recognizing the importance of both religion and government, the state, as agents of socialization, because of their impact on the life force. Traditionally, family members have served as the primary caregivers in our culture, but in the 20th century, the family's protective function was steadily transferred to outside agencies such as hospitals, mental health clinics, and child care centers. Many of these agencies are run by groups affiliated with certain religions or by the state. Both organized religion and government have impacted the life force by reinstituting some of the rites of passage once observed in agricultural communities and early industrial. Module 13. Agents of social societies. For example, religious organizations stipulate certain traditional rites that may bring together all the members of an extended family, even if they never meet for any other reason. And government regulations stipulate the ages at which a person may drive a car, drink alcohol, vote in elections, marry without parental permission, work overtime, and retire. These regulations do not constitute strict rites of passage. Most 18-year-olds choose not to vote, and most people choose their age of retirement without reference to government dictates. One which social institutions
Why are we still doing this stupid perspective shit? I really don't care. One is A. Oh. 2 is B. Oh. 3 is B. 4 is functionalist. 5 is peer. Alright, I'm done with this shit.